Welcome back to Never Did It. I'm Brad Garoon and I'm here with Jake Ziegler. On Never Did It, we look back at the last 100 years of movie history in an effort to fill in some of our own movie blind spots. And today we are joined? Today we are joined by Danielle Segel, movie enthusiast and scaredy cat, to talk about, well, we're recording this on Hanukkah and we watched a very Jewish movie directed by Barbra Streisand, and we missed Halloween, so we're going to do a horror movie.
Yes, I'm wearing my festive sweater. So I only get to wear it, 1 week out of the year, so it gets a little usage this week.
Why don't we start with good old Babs? She directed Yentl, starring herself and Mandy Patinkin and Amy Irving. And I believe, Jake, correct me if I'm wrong, was nominated for an Oscar for this performance?
Yes, Amy Irving was the one actor who got nominated of the three leads.
Pretty crazy given the movie.
Patinkin and Barbra Streisand were both up for the Golden Globe, and Amy Irving was not up for that, but she got the Oscar nomination instead.
Interesting when the Golden Globes gets it right and the Oscars don't.
Yeah.
Danielle, did you have a relationship with the movie Yentl?
Yes, so this was a third watching for me. I remember watching Yentl when I was much, much younger. And I have to say, when I was a kid and I watched it as a huge musicals fan, I was very confused by Yentl as a kid. I was expecting a musical, and I was used to sad musicals as well as happy musicals. So that's not what threw me. What threw me was that the only person who sang was Barbra Streisand. I was ready for a musical where, everyone had a chance to sing. So as a kid, I did not quite understand the sort of inner monologue role that the songs played. And it was only when I rewatched it as an adult that I was like, oh, I get it now. I see what they're doing. I think there are some stylistic choices about when she's singing in her head and then when she's singing but her lips are moving. And there didn't seem to be too much rhyme or reason as to when those two things happened, but I thought it was a very interesting choice that both of those methods were used. Don't know if I entirely buy into it, but interesting that it was there.
And Jake, you'd never seen Yentl before. That's why it's on this episode. Before I get into the plot, which is unhinged, what did you think of Yentl?
It's good. I liked it. It's a 3.5-star movie on Letterboxd, so it does feel a little bit long. Takes kind of a long time to get to the fireworks factory, as it were. I liked it. I also, Danielle, totally agree. I noticed, and I couldn't quite figure out, why they were doing the song. Some were out loud, I guess, and some were just in her head, maybe. I couldn't quite nail the distinction between that, but yeah, I thought it was good. I thought the leads were both very good. They had some, they had chemistry together, and I bought everyone falling for each other at the times that they were doing it. So overall, I think it's just a good, solid movie, and I've known about it for a long time. Obviously, it's Yentl. I mean, it's a famous movie, so I was happy to have an opportunity to cross it off my list. Especially after we did What's Up Doc in our first season, and saw Barbra Streisand. I realized I've seen so few of her movies, especially from her prime years. So I definitely wanted to see a few more of these because she was an enormous star at this time.
It's pretty wild to consider that there are 13 years between What's Up Doc and this movie, where this is her directorial debut. She also wrote the movie, produced the movie. This was her baby. This was the story she really wanted to tell about a woman in an ultra-Orthodox community in vague Eastern European country in the 19aughts, whose father has been secretly teaching her Talmud, and she sort of reveals that she's learned once he passes away very early in the movie. That's not a spoiler. And then that community is not going to have it, so she bails on the community, cuts her hair, and pretends to be a boy so she can study in yeshiva in the next town over. That's all fine and is an interesting storyline. It's not actually the storyline of the movie, her knowledge of Jewish teachings. It's a love triangle between her and Mandy Patinkin, who doesn't know that she's a woman, although how anyone could not know. No one knows. No one even suspects. That's crazy.
She her voice. She speaks in the exact same voice. It's so high-pitched. Why are you getting away with this?
Very easily. They're my brother also didn't have a beard. I guess that's normal.
Yeah, hey, super easy, barely an inconvenience, right?
It certainly was.
It's like in that movie where they try and explain as many things as possible by making up science. I think it's in Thank You for Smoking, where they're all smoking on a spaceship or something, and they throw in the line, which is oh, isn't it great that we invented that thing that means that you can smoke on a spaceship? So it's sort of like that. They had to explain away how no one knew. So, Avigdor says, oh, don't worry, my brother couldn't grow a beard either.
So he said that in such a way that I assumed he knew. and he was like covering for her. But no, not the case. Not the case at all, really, as the movie reveals later.
Thought the same thing. I was like, he knows. Like there was a couple of lines and there was like, oh yeah, he's in on this, but yeah, definitely not.
That's fascinating because I never would have assumed that he knows. I think from my reading of it, we are taking it at face value that he has no idea. He feels a little bit protective of him because Yentl Anshul seems a bit, he's a bit nebbishy. He looks a bit scared and shy, and Avigdor takes him under his wing. I never read that as like, oh, he suspects.
I think that's probably a symptom of having watched it young, because that is what the movie is telegraphing to you, that he doesn't know. I mean, Yentl walks into this yeshiva, immediately gets bullied out of a couple of kopecks, shekels, basically, and Avigdor comes to the rescue because Yentl, as Anshul, is too weak to arm wrestle this guy. So yes, that is what's happening. He's taking her under his wing. He's being protective of this, he assumes, guy. But because I think Jake and I came at this in middle age with this like cynical read, it seems like he knows, but he doesn't. And then as the movie goes on, he's clearly falling for his friend and doesn't know how to deal with it. And I think his monologue at the end of the movie, which I won't spoil, was a nice way to reflect back on those awkward scenes. And also in this movie is Amy Irving as Hadass, I believe her name was.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Avigdor's fiance. And this does get at some interesting, like, what is the role of a woman in a Orthodox Jewish society, because she's very subservient. Eventually, a secret that I think they could have delved into a bit more about Avigdor's family disrupts that relationship and moves Anshul/Yentl into that relationship. I thought that a lot of the story beats were really interesting. The way that Hadass's character is sort of moved from one person to the other without much friction, but with much comedy. Those parts were very funny. But I think because this was this is my take. My feeling is because this was Streisand's first movie and she decided to do everything, there are some shaky bits. Like you guys both mentioned, like the diegesis of the music. At no point did I know if other people could hear her or not. I didn't know how real these songs were. And then
Don't you just burst into song all the time? I mean, don't other people hear you?
You're a huge musical fan. I know you love those MGM classics. And this is an MGM musical also, just not in the mold of those other MGM classics. Isn't the whole point of musicals, like the whole point is like your emotion is so great that you can't help but sing? That's like the logic behind it.
So it really depends. So there are some musicals which the songs push along the plot. They're sometimes called book musicals, as far as I remember. So those are, songs where you burst into song and things are revealed, or you declare your love and they serve a point within the plot. There are other musicals where the songs actually don't push the plot along at all. They are there for commentary. Kander and Ebb do a really great job of this in Chicago or Cabaret, where the songs are really there to illustrate a point or give you a bit of an insight into a character, or maybe just have a thematic link in some way. In some of those old MGM musicals, some of the songs could be completely lifted out and replaced with the other ones. If you watch Singing in the Rain, those songs actually don't push the plot forward that much. They're wonderful songs.
How would I know that Gene Kelly and what's her name spent the night together, if you could just pull that out and put it somewhere else?
Why? Because they sing Good Morning the next morning? Because they actually stay up all night. So
I know.
Right, but with their friend there.
Well, sure. Nothing. I know, it's Hollywood. Big things are happening.
And obviously Moses supposes his toes are roses is not a song that's pushing the plot forward in Singing in the Rain. So I think with Yentl, it's sort of interesting because it's not really pushing the plot forward. The plot is chugging along quite nicely without the songs, but the songs do give you this sort of lofty commentary of like what is going through Yentl's head. So the songs and the music, I think, play an interesting role in this one, which is sort of doesn't really fall into either category.
Jake, what did you think of the music?
I mean, I liked the songs. Once you can kind of get past the awkwardness of, like I said, trying to figure out where they exist, even in the universe of the movie. But yeah, I mean, I like the songs. You like Papa, Can You Hear Me? I mean, I've heard that song before. I mean, people have sung that. I mean, I like those songs. I mean, that one and The Way He Makes Me Feel, I thought were good. Those are the two Oscar-nominated songs from the movie too. So I liked those. It didn't vault up the list like some of my favorite musicals or anything, but I thought they were pretty good.
Yeah, I thought most of them sounded like each other, with the exception of Papa, Can You Hear Me? And then that one gets reprised at the end, which I thought that was very good and a cool way to end the movie. And also that shot, which was clearly taken from the back of a boat, flying away from the bigger boat. That was incredible. And like the kind of cinematography that we didn't really get in the movie up to that point, a breathtaking way to end the movie.
It ended very strong. And I even like just the meat of the ending, where if we're going to spoil a 40-year-old movie here, that Yentl still decides she wants to be her own person and not be in any relationship. And that's when she gets on the boat and sings the song and does the whole thing. But yeah, I really like that ending. I thought it was a strong way to end the movie.
I loved the ending, and I love that shot at the end with the boat, and it's just like very sweeping, and it feels very epic for what has been a really quiet, small, intimate movie up until that moment, but that last bit is really sweeping. And it sort of also gives you that optimism at the end, especially because of Avigdor's reaction when the reveal happens. I find very sad. Like, he's built up this wonderful relationship with this person who is his bestie. They've shared these wonderful moments of Torah and Talmud learning, and his reaction at the end, even when he knows that, she is a woman, his reaction is, great, you don't have to study anymore. I will be your husband. We can run away together and you can just be my subservient wife. And she's like, you have not been listening to me this whole time. I don't want this kind of life. So it just, a little part of me inside dies when I see that bit, because I'm like, Avigdor, how did you get that so wrong when you've built up this great relationship throughout the whole movie?
Yeah, I thought that scene was incredible because Avigdor, we know from the beginning that he has very regressive, well, not for his time, but for our time, very regressive views about women. And he's a hypocrite. She asks him, and again, just spoilers for this movie, Yentl asks him, what would you do if there was some reason that you were not allowed to study? Would you still study? And he said, of course, I would still study. I would find a way. I would study anyway. Even if it was forbidden, I would study. And he loses his mind when he finds out she's a woman for a few reasons, and they're all very complicated. And I was like, I kind of wish the whole movie had been able to do what's happening in this scene where he lashes out in such a rageful way because there's a lot going on. He's mad because he's sinned. He's mad because he's had these gay panic moments where he thought he was in love with his male friend. And I love the way he admits, he's like, I didn't know what to do with these feelings I was having. That was pretty intense for a movie like this, which was clearly, well, not even intended to be. This was a huge hit. This movie made a ton of money. And it's like very queer coded in a way that I feel like not a lot of movies were back then, and in a way that it almost doesn't want to engage with itself, except for in this scene. And a little bit when Anshul and Hadass are having their marital discussions after their sham wedding. So yeah, there's some like interesting things, but I didn't read up on like what the public reaction to the queerness of the movie was. Did either of you?
No, the thing that I thought that was sort of, in the run-up to the movie is it was in a bit of production purgatory for a while. It took a long time to get this movie made. They thought Barbra Streisand was too old and we should change it, and why is Barbra Streisand playing that role? And then they ended up sort of like changing the character a little bit so that she could play it. I'm pleased she ended up playing it. I think it was a great role for her. But I think it took a really long time to get made. So maybe there was just so much build-up from this movie that maybe it was well received when it finally did happen. But it doesn't seem, if you were to describe this plot to someone and not knowing it, I don't know whether they would say, wow, that sounds like a blockbuster.
Definitely not. I mean, it sounds like a movie that would come out now that no one would see except us. It got praise at the time, I just saw, because Yentl and Avigdor don't end up together. Like we've been saying, like it does symbolically end with them in their very small, quiet life in Europe, and she goes off to much bigger things in America, although she's 10 years early, really, for like egalitarianism and Judaism in the United States. But it'll catch up. She's young. Yeah, interesting stuff. Before I move on, does anyone else have anything else they want to talk about with Yentl?
I love the reveal scene in this movie. I actually watched it twice. Like I rewound it and watched that little scene again because I think it is a bit of a masterclass in acting. I think it's really great. I think the script in that moment hits the marks. I think in a way that the rest of the movie plods along a little bit, but it's worth it for that reveal scene. I also love Mandy Patinkin. He can do no wrong. So I love seeing him on screen anyway. And I think that was a great moment because you just see all the conflicting emotions just like exploding. So I thought it was worth the payoff.
That's like far and away the best I've ever seen him. And I like his stuff. I'm a Homeland fan, and I think The Princess Bride is amazing. And actually, I don't know that much more of him aside from that, but that's
what I was trying to think. How many movies have I seen Mandy Patinkin in? Like, I watched the show he was on, I think it was called Chicago Hope, or there was this one doctor show or something he was on for like a season, and he was awesome in it. Like, other than that, and Princess Bride, and now this movie, for someone who seems like so ubiquitous and like, oh yeah, he's in a lot of stuff, I couldn't like think of anything else I had seen him in without looking it up.
Yeah, I mean, he's on Instagram. That's the important thing. He and his wife are on Instagram.
And he says a lot of things I agree with, so yeah.
He's done a lot of Broadway. He was famous for being George in Sunday in the Park with George, which was a really wonderful role for him. He did that opposite Bernadette Peters, I think.
You're the only person who would know the answer to that.
Now I have to fact check myself. I don't want to get it wrong.
What do I know her from?
A lot. She's done so much Broadway. She is like a musical starlet. She's done a lot of films as well.
She was in The Jerk. That's what I know her from. Bernadette Peters from The Jerk. I actually really don't like that movie, but the song when she plays the trombone on the beach is like one of the great scenes in movie history.
I have a question for both of you.
Yeah.
Our movies are female directors, and I wanted to ask you, could you tell that this was directed by a woman? Or if you did not know that it was directed by Barbra Streisand, would you have been able to tell?
Only in that it is tackling gender themes, and that is something that we've been doing this series now for several weeks, and we keep seeing over and over again that most of the movies directed by women through this point in history, when this is really the first time, and I think Streisand, Elaine May are kind of American trailblazers in making female directing more ubiquitous, because it's like barely existent before this, especially in major studio films. Before the early 70s, it hadn't happened for like 30 years. There was like a 30-year gap. But these movies tend to be about female concerns, and that makes sense, women's concerns, which makes sense because that's what Hollywood executives would think would make a woman director marketable, or what she'd know to do well. But I could see like Sidney Lumet doing a movie like this, maybe not well. I mean, he did The Wiz. He was outside of his realm quite a bit. But no, not necessarily, especially because just a lot of the movie is very silly in a way that I think you would expect someone who doesn't have their finger on the pulse of this issue of women cross-dressing as men to study at yeshiva.
It's a common thing that, every day where we're thinking about, entering into a yeshiva.
Yeah, what do you think? Like, is this? Could you tell?
I wouldn't say that I could tell so much that it was directed by a woman. Like, I could see somebody a little more recent, but somebody like a Bill Condon, I think, could have directed a movie like this.
That's a great call.
But what I could tell, as far as the director is, like, I feel like I could tell it was directed by an actor and someone who was like primarily focused on acting. Because I think something like Brad, you alluded to, some of the other things in the movie felt a little lacking, and I think they're minor complaints. Like I said, I think this is still a really good movie, but it did have that feel of being directed by an actor, and I think I felt that more than directed by a woman.
Well, a movie that I really don't think you can feel was directed by a woman is Mary Lambert's Pet Sematary.
Can I hit the awards for Yentl?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, hit the awards. It was such a good segue. Go on, though. Do the awards.
So 5 Oscar nominations for Yentl. As we mentioned, Amy Irvin was nominated. The art direction was nominated, which I think is pretty cool. The movie did look very good. 2 of the songs mentioned, Papa Can You Hear Me and The Way He Makes Me Feel, were nominated. And then the one Oscar that it won, IMDb lists like the official like Academy title, and the actual title of the award that it won was Best Music, Original Song Score, and its Adaptation or Best Adaptation Score. That's the one it won. At the Golden Globes, it won Best Motion Picture, comedy or musical, and Barbra Streisand won the Best Director at the Golden Globes. It had four other nominations too. Mandy Patinkin, again, was nominated there, and it was also nominated for 3 Razzies at the same time, which I think is garbage, and the Razzies are stupid. But yeah, so that's the award pedigree for Yentl. Pretty good.
Danielle asked us if Yentl felt like it had been directed by a woman, and a movie that really doesn't feel like it was directed by a woman is Mary Lambert's Pet Sematary, which is a Stephen King adaptation. Jake, why did you recommend Pet Sematary?
Well, this was much like Yentl. This was a very big hit when it came out. I think kind of a surprise hit, more so than some of the other King adaptations that had come before it. So being a big movie, and I was born in 1982, so I definitely remember this movie growing up, and certainly was way too scary for me to watch. Like when it first came out, I was only 7 or 8 or so at that time. And I certainly wouldn't have watched it then. And then by the time I got old enough, I wasn't really into horror movies, and it just was never my thing. But it being as popular as it was, and also I thought that we should cover a horror movie, as part of just trying to get as many diverse type of movies in here, that it would be a good candidate. It's not great. So not so much, but I'm still kind of glad I saw it. I watched it finally.
Oh, and you had never seen it before either. So I had the same issue.
I'd never seen it before either. I think this is the last decade where I hadn't seen that's the thing. I had not seen a single movie from the 80s directed by a woman,
That's not true. You just hadn't seen any that I hadn't also seen.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. That's right.
Because
Thank you.
we've both seen Fast Times at Ridgemont High. We've both seen Big. Amy Heckerling is as well.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, just in the effort of getting something we hadn't seen before. Yeah.
Right. And that was the same thing for me with Yentl, except I didn't want to do a horror movie. Now a lot of horror movies are directed by women. In fact, it's a genre with like really, really good gender equity in terms of who's running the movie. Even just in the past couple of years, we've had The Substance,
Bodies,
The First Omen, Titan. So yeah, lots of gnarly stuff with women working through what it means to be a woman through violence the same way men have been doing for decades and decades and decades. Pet Sematary, I did not feel... Okay, let's talk about it a bit. Can you just tell us, before we get into it, what is this movie about?
The movie is about a family, husband and wife. They've got a couple of young kids, and they move to this remote town in Maine. And the craggly old neighbor, who's played by Fred Gwynne, who is I think the only actor who's got a clue what to do in this movie.
When it comes to everything except a Maine accent, he's I love Fred Gwynne. Don't get me wrong.
Who doesn't? I mean, it's hard not to love. So it was nice to see him. He's kind of doing the Richard Farnsworth in Misery part.
Sort of, except Richard Farnsworth doesn't cause all the problems in Misery.
So what this guy does, Judd, his name Judd Crandall. So the family has a cat, and when the cat dies, Judd Crandall shows the dad, his name is Lewis. Well, there's this weird pet cemetery in town where cemetery is spelled incorrectly. That's where the movie gets its title. When he buried his pet there many years ago, the pet came back from the dead. So of course he wants to try that with his cat, and then it turns out, later on, if we're going to spoil Pet Sematary a little bit, he decides to try the same thing when one of his children dies. He thinks he can bury the child in the pet cemetery and have it come back to life, and horror ensues from there, and on we go.
Danielle, we're just going to tell everyone now, you only made it through half the movie.
This is true. I made it through half the movie and then I bailed. I apparently, in my older age, have become an even bigger scaredy cat than I used to be. I used to have no problem with horror movies. I used to watch horror movies all the time, especially if it was just blood and gore and that was about it. I watched that no problem. But yes, in my older age, I've become very sensitive to it. And because also it involved child death, and it was all rather disturbing, and I could see exactly where it was going. They'd already buried the cat had come back to life, the cat was kind of a zombie and was violent, so I could see where this was going. There was going to be a dead child who turned into a creepy resurrected child. I could see that in the future. I did not make it. So from what I saw from the first half, it definitely, sets up the premise. What's coming. It's very creepy. It's very tense. There are these several moments where these giant trucks are speeding past the road, and we know it's a plot point, right? Because the pets are getting killed by these trucks that aren't looking. A child is probably going to get hit by this truck. But because there's a lot of building of tension every time the truck goes by, it sort of releases the tension a bit, but also it's got that little bit of a shock factor. So I thought that was sort of an interesting motif that keeps on coming up. The movie's about as subtle as a brick. Yeah, there isn't nuanced storytelling in this. It's really straightforward storytelling. Stephen King was involved in writing the screenplay as well. He had a heavy hand in it. It was a very kind of standard plot formation, but then I wussed out and couldn't watch it further. But the bits I saw, were quite gruesome. And when we have these flashbacks to, the mum in the family, her name is Rachel. There are all these flashbacks with Rachel and her sister, who had some kind of disease or illness which made her rather deformed. And that really was there was that moment of body horror when you see the makeup of her sister Zelda, who's deformed on the bed, and she's obviously haunted by the idea of her sister, and that keeps on playing, coming back into play as well. So it's, you've got the tension from the trucks and what's happening in the modern day, but then also the family is sort of carrying their own family curse with them.
Yeah, so I would say this movie is filled with, you were listing a whole bunch of plot elements and story. And then on top of that, it's sort of a lot of what I call, and I'm sure a lot of people call, Stephen King bullshit. Zelda, the sister, who's played by a man, just to make it scarier, in a situation that I think had Sam Raimi drooling. He I'm sure loved this, especially the Zelda stuff. And also the way the trucks were driving by, because that I would agree. I would actually say that's the only effective tension building element in the movie is the trucks going by. It's very, it's also just like insane that no one ever did anything about this. You have like the suicide of the nanny, which leads to nothing. You have a lot of talk about God and whether or not people dying is up to God. That really goes nowhere and leads to nothing because it doesn't. Lewis, who is played by Dale Midkiff, who couldn't act his way out of a paper bag and really drag this movie into the mud, much more so than if anyone with a shred of talent could have. But it's the 80s, so horror is just
so
like a dead
bad.
zone.
He's like, I mean, he's like All My Children, Days of Our Lives level bad. Like it was hard to watch. I mean, when the kid does get hit, he does the Darth Vader, no, it's kind of funny and it shouldn't be,
Well, it really, to me at least, I was like, how tragic could this be? Because Miko Hughes, who played Gage, the little boy, huge part of my childhood. He was on Full House. Famously, his parents stole all his money that he made when he was growing up. So that was what was happening on the set of this movie too, where he became famous for being a demonic kid. Also, he's quite good. He's like a 2-year-old, 3-year-old kid, and he's like actually quite scary later on in the movie.
Both of these, we talked about awards for Yentl. You wouldn't think Pet Sematary has any awards, but both of these actors who played the children, Miko Hughes and Blaise Berdal, who played Ellie, the sister, were both nominated, recognized by the Young Artist Awards. They had a category for under 9 that Miko Hughes was recognized for, and then Blaise Berdal was in like the teen, young, whatever other category it was. So they did get noticed there.
Yeah, and I was actually thinking, what's her name? Blaise Berdal? I remember thinking, wow, this is a crappy kid actor. And then at the end, she starts having nightmares. Oh, there's a whole other plot element about the ghost who haunts everyone, which was just a blatant ripoff. King clearly just ripped off an American Werewolf in London there. That's annoying. The book was written after that movie came out too. And hold on, I have like so many complaints about this movie. When the little girl starts being haunted by the ghost, I thought some of her monologues about her visions were actually like pretty good. So the kid actors just blowing their parents out of the water with, Jake, as you said it, absolutely soap opera performances.
I did spend the first 5 to 10 minutes of this movie, because I watched it, I made my husband watch it with me because I didn't want to watch it by myself. And I spent the first 10 minutes saying, I don't understand how this guy is performing this role as Lewis. It was almost like a parody. It was so wooden. That made it kind of a slog to watch totally. Because of that acting.
For sure. He's awful. And there's scenes with him and Judd. George Gwynn's a real actor. So watching them go back and forth is like watching George Gwynn act against a wall. It's very odd. Okay, so yeah, the ghost bothered me. That really did nothing, because also the ghost is a force for good, but what he does makes bad things. Like, he gets the wife killed. That's his fault. Then there's this other piece that's not said out loud, but it is in the text and it is in the names of the characters. So Rachel is half Jewish, or at least born Jewish. Her last name is Goldman. Her dad's name is Irwin. And her dad is this like total schmuck asshole who punches out Lewis at the baby's funeral. Now, this movie is it wants to be about what happens after you die, but it doesn't engage with, first off, we don't know why the marriage is bad or why this Jewish family hates their doctor son-in-law, who they said, he will always bring you grief. Why? We don't know. And they never get into it. And then you have all this stuff with like, it's an Indian burial ground, but it's not because of anything the Indians did. They say the Micmac Indians moved away after the bad stuff started happening in this burial ground. Even just like making it an Indian curse is kind of icky, obviously on the face of it, but not uncommon for the 80s. But then it doesn't even have an opinion. It doesn't even have like a real offensive opinion about that, because the natives didn't want that to be happening. So what even is it? And then there's just like a whole bunch of other Stephen King bullshit, like when Danielle, you didn't see this part, but when Lewis is carrying Gage to the pet cemetery, there's actually a kind of a cool set where you see a cliff, and behind the cliff in the water are a pile of rocks, but the pile of rocks turn into someone's face and jut up towards Lewis. Never addressed. We don't really know what that was. It's just a very strange thing to be in there. So it kind of blows my mind that to make this kind of money, people had to have watched this more than once in the theater. I don't understand the appeal. And also, it's like enduring. There was a sequel and a remake. So what the shit is this all about?
A sequel that was directed by Mary Lambert, and a remake and a sequel to the remake.
Oh, I didn't know there was a sequel to the remake.
I didn't either, but I looked that up and I was like, and it came out like 2 years ago. It was
Yeah.
Pet Sematary Bloodlines.
And what was the symbolism, if any, of the nanny slash house cleaner committing suicide? She talks about pain. She has this enduring pain in her stomach, and she just seems like a bit of a forlorn individual. And then 10 minutes later, we witness her commit suicide. And then we see that the funeral. Are we just paving the way for more death? I thought that was going to be a more, like that was going to be a plot point, and it wasn't.
I don't know. I don't understand. When that happened, I was like, oh, is this going to be about the doctor not being good? Because she's like, I know I have stomach cancer, but I wouldn't let him examine me. And then she kills. It goes nowhere. This movie's trash. I overrated. I give it 2.5 stars because it was very easy to watch. And also I was just kind of blown away by Gage. There's also a painting. I thought this was kind of cool. And then now that we're talking about all these loose threads, I kind of hate it. There's a painting in the Goldman house of a creepy little kid wearing a top hat and holding a cane and wearing a robe. And then Gage is dressed like that later in the movie right before he kills his mother. What is any of that? Is that like, because in The Shining, there's a person with a top hat. Is it a connection to The Shining? I know King liked to link his stories. There's this whole like universe.
Isn't that the benevolent spirit or the like evil ghost that's sort of like taking over Gage because he was buried and brought back? Because there was some commentary that I read that was around like, that it's not that Gage is like turned into a zombie, it's that he now has like an evil spirit like that has embodied him. So
well, the movie doesn't seem particularly interested in that, so I'm not interested in that either. I find all of that very frustrating. I thought a lot about Hereditary when I was watching this. Danielle, you're not going to be able to handle Hereditary.
No.
But Jake made me watch it for this podcast, and it is about different themes than Pet Sematary, if Pet Sematary has any themes at all. But it handles like the grief over a dead child way better and in a much more interesting way, and in ways where at the end of it there are things that aren't explained, but we had a really interesting conversation about like ways you can interpret the movie. Whereas I think if you're trying to interpret Pet Sematary, you're barking up the wrong tree. I'll say it that way. There's no there. It's like what does Oscar say in The Office? He's trying to figure out someone's pathology after some of his writing, and he goes, but I know it has no content. That's what this is.
I have a plot, again, another plot question is that if Judd, or Herman Munster, if Judd hadn't introduced the whole burying the cat idea, none of this would happen. Why was he so intent on showing this family this very creepy pet cemetery, even suggested, yay, let's go bury your cat? And then when Lewis says, oh, have they ever buried a person there? And Judd is like, no, why would they ever do that? And you're like, well, okay, that's where that's going.
You didn't see this part of the movie, but when it becomes clear that Lewis is going to do this, Judd says, I told you about this because I didn't think Ellie was ready to move on without her cat. I did it for her. And the cat being evil is not that big a deal. Lewis gets scratched in the face once, but later the cat is like cuddling up with Rachel, so it's clearly not that evil. But then he tells a story about a friend of his who came back, who was like on his way back from World War II and got killed on the way home, and how that was so unfair. So the father buried him and he became a zombie. He is just straight up a zombie, this guy in the flashback. So there's no consistency to how people come back, because he's a zombie. Gage is like a possessed demon. And then Rachel comes back at the end of the movie because she's killed and she's got pus squirting out of her eye, but she's conscious enough to kiss her husband before raising up a knife. And then the movie ends. But we hear him scream. So why do they even cut to black? I hate it. I'm so mad. I love when this happens. It's like fun to talk about, but I'm so mad at this movie.
How accurate is it to the book?
No idea. I mean, King was involved, so probably pretty accurate. It's really frustrating. I watched The Long Walk earlier this year. It's pretty good. And it does this thing that King did well, which is friendships and relationships. We're recording this 2 days after Rob Reiner was killed. Stand By Me is he called it his crowning achievement. And that's a movie about, like childhood friendships. And the things that are appealing about the movie It are the childhood friendships. And Shawshank Redemption is the friendship between the two main characters, and even The Green Mile, the friendship between Tom Hanks and Michael Clark Duncan. These are the things that are great in Stephen King stories, and that is true of The Long Walk. That I'm watching these young men walk down the street and get to know each other, and I'm like, oh, this has that Stephen King magic. So it's frustrating that there's this other side of just like magical nonsense bullshit that he has no grasp of, but that's what he's most famous for. It just drives me insane. I don't understand the world.
Well, and the world overlaps, right? So like all the stories are set in the same
State.
town.
No, just like they're all in Maine.
And they've got some overlapping and some Easter eggs where they overlap. And
they even overlap with Stephen King's son, Joe Hill, is now a writer as well, and also a film writer. And those stories overlap too. That's a whole bunch of nonsense that nerds can get excited about.
Well, and Stephen King appears in the movie too. He's got a brief part. He's the pastor, at the funeral.
Yeah,
that's how you know that it was like blessed. Terrible pun, accidental. But how the movie received his blessing, like he's participating in it. Anywho, I have nothing else to say. I've said a lot.
I know we kind of had this segue. What do you think was the female director stamp on this movie?
Nothing. Also, Mary Lambert is just like not the person you want to hold up as an example. I mean, she made a lot of money, so I guess in that regard, she did the sequel, and she's still working. I mean, she did one of those Christmas movies, which I hate all of. But one of it had Jason Biggs and Heather Graham. I think it was called Best Christmas Ever. So that was just a couple years ago. So she's still working, still making, and she'd done looks like a lot of TV stuff and things. So
I guess also watching this movie made me realize how little I know about Stephen King. I mean, I've seen Stephen King movies. I love Stand By Me. That is one of my favorite movies of all time. I must have seen it over 100 times. And I've seen Carrie and Green Mile, and I've seen a bunch, but I don't know about that whole world that existed. So I wonder whether, if you know that world, maybe you watch this movie and go, oh, that's a link to that, and that's a link to this thing. And
I mean, probably, especially like at least with the way that Gage is dressed near the end. Who cares? Like, this movie is bad. Not so many female-directed movies in the 80s. We'll finally be able to do a list next week when we get to the 90s of our top women-directed movies. So we're just going to sign off here by asking Danielle, what is something great that you've watched recently?
I saw Nouvelle Vague recently, and I loved it. I'm also a big French New Wave nerd, so I really appreciated all the nods to the directors. I loved for those who haven't seen it, they do, every time a person or a character is introduced, there is even like a placard underneath, so you know exactly who the characters are, and they always stare right at the camera.
It's the MCU/Wes Andersonization of the French New Wave.
Yes, and I think because I knew Abu Dassouf very well, I knew which bits of the movie they were filming, like as the movie in a movie went along. I think for people who are not fans of French New Wave, this movie might be a bit slow. But for me, because I love this stuff, I really liked the movie. I thought it was stylistically really slick. I thought it was funny. I thought the script was on point. It had a certain flair to it. And it was just an enjoyable movie, sort of a lighter, enjoyable movie. And I really liked it.
You've got to see Blue Moon, because
it's next on my list.
It doesn't do it in the same way. It's not like styled in that same way, but it does for musical theater what Nouvelle Vague does for the French New Wave. Jake, what's something good you've seen recently?
Just last night, I took my daughter to see Five Nights at Freddy's 2.
No, we said something good.
Oh,
something you hated.
Yeah, sorry. I was just thinking the most recent thing I've seen. Two things that I watched recently. I watched Little Amelie, or the character of Rain. That came out recently, and I thought that was just, the animation that was just beautiful. The story that was pretty good. The kid is a little annoying. I know that, Brad, that was when we talked about the other night. The kid's a little annoying, but I think just for the animation alone, I think it's just really gorgeous. And it's like 72 minutes or something like that. So if you're a fan of animation at all, I would certainly recommend it. And then I watched one I think a lot of people have been watching recently, watched Wake Up Dead Man the other day too, and I did enjoy that. I've liked it. I like it the least of the three. It seemed to be missing some of the mischief, like kind of the mischievous fun of the other ones. It just kind of seemed like a bit more of everything was kind of just super serious. And Glass Onion got serious, but there was also a lot of levity in the early going, and that's kind of seemed missing from this one. But that being said, it's still pretty good. Josh O'Connor's really great in it. Glenn Close is particularly good in it, and Daniel Craig doing Benoit Blanc. He doesn't have as much to do in this one, but he's still doing Benoit Blanc, and I like that.
Yeah, I was just listening to an interview with Ryan Johnson. He was talking about how his growing up as an evangelical Christian informed a lot of the movie, and I was like, I don't care about that in a murder mystery so much. I also liked Wake Up Dead Man, but not as much as the other two. And one thing I realized is I'm obsessed with the Peter Ustinov Hercule Poirot movies, and what I realized was there's a major structural difference between the Benoit Blanc movies and the Hercule Poirot movies, which is that Benoit Blanc is either called in when the cops need him, or he's called in by someone because someone has died. whether it's before the movie started or during the movie. Hercule Poirot just like happens to be there when someone's killed, and there's something really charming and sweet about that. So I hope that when Rian Johnson returns to this, which he will, he's not doing another Knives Out movie next, but I think he will come back to it eventually. I hope we get like a whoops, somebody died in front of me kind of movie. Recently, my wife and I just watched The Shop Around the Corner, which was directed by Ernst Lubitsch, who was the director of To Be or Not to Be, which we covered on this podcast. The Shop Around the Corner is a great Christmas movie. It was remade as You've Got Mail. Shop Around the Corner is the origin of that story. And it's got Jimmy Stewart and the Wizard of Oz. And it's really sweet and charming and about the goings on at a leather goods shop in Hungary in the it seems like it's pre-war. They're not concerned with the Nazis, so probably takes place before the war, but was made during the war. Danielle, thanks so much for coming on. We got to have you back sometime. Maybe we'll do like a musical series and bring you on.
I would. Thank you. Yes, I would absolutely come again. Thank you so much for having me. This was amazing.
We'll be back next week with a jumbo-sized episode because we just couldn't stick to 2 movies total. We couldn't stick to 1 movie each for the 1990s. So Catherine Bigelow and Jane Campion and a whole bunch of 2 other directors will be covering when we come back next week for the women-directed movies of the 1990s.